Commander Zeph Kanul adjusted his biosuit as the massive doors to the Galactic Council chambers hissed open. The Vorthak delegation walked through the gleaming corridors of the station, their crystalline exoskeletons catching the artificial light. Behind them followed the Crimson Fleet's most decorated officers, each one bearing scars from countless victories across the Outer Rim territories. The emergency assembly had been called after 3 cycles of increasingly aggressive expansion by the Vorthak Empire. 17 minor civilizations had already fallen under their rule, their populations either enslaved or relocated to mining colonies. The Galactic Council's patience was wearing thin, but Zeph Kanul felt confident. After all, who could stand against the might of the Vorthak Armada? Inside the massive spherical chamber, representatives from over 200 species waited in their designated sections. The air hummed with tension as translation devices worked overtime to convert the dozens of languages being spoken simultaneously. At the center of the chamber, the Prime Elders sat in their ancient meditation pods, beings so old that most had forgotten their original species. Elder Thex Mor 9, whose translucent form seemed to shimmer between dimensions, raised what might have been a hand. The chamber fell silent immediately. When the Prime Elders spoke, every intelligent species in the galaxy listened. "We have gathered to address the actions of the Vorthak Empire." The Elder's voice resonated directly in every mind present. "Your expansion has violated the peaceful coexistence accord signed 300 cycles ago." Zeph Kanul stepped forward, his massive form towering over most other delegates. "Honored Elders, we have committed no violations. The territories we claim were uninhabited or held by species too primitive to qualify for protection under galactic law." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the chamber. The gentle singers of Melodia created a harmony of discontent, while the machine collective's representatives emitted rapid bursts of electronic communication that sounded like static to organic ears. Elder Yunsai Epsilon, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, projected images into the center of the chamber. The agricultural world of Kepler 438b had a population of 2 million Taroni farmers. The mining world of Gliesa 6667c housed 3 million Nexari families. These were not uninhabited worlds. "They offered no resistance worthy of the name," Zeph Kanul replied dismissively. "If they cannot defend their territory, they have no right to claim it." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Elder Zal Qui Prime, the oldest of the assembled beings, slowly opened sensory appendages that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. "There is one species," the ancient elder began, "that you have not yet encountered in your expansion. A species from a small blue world in what you call the Sol System. They call themselves humans." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Vorthak had heard whispers about this species, but they occupied only a single star system and had achieved space travel relatively recently. Surely they posed no threat to an empire that spanned 47 systems. "We know of these humans," Zeph Kanul said with a dismissive gesture. "A young species that has barely left their home system. What relevance do they have to this discussion?" Elder Thex Mor 9's form solidified slightly, becoming more visible to the organic beings present. "We were ancient when their star was young. We watched their world from afar as they developed. What we observed changed us." The chamber filled with an oppressive silence. Even the mechanical whirring of the machine collective's representatives ceased. "These humans," Elder Yunsai Epsilon continued, "are unlike any species we have encountered in our billion-cycle existence. They are individually weak, short-lived, and possess no natural weapons or defenses. Yet they have conquered their entire homeworld through conflict alone." Images began to appear in the chamber's central display sphere. Scenes of human history flashed before the assembled delegates. ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons, massive naval battles, aerial combat between primitive aircraft, and finally, the terrible moment when humans first split the atom and turned it into a weapon. In their brief existence, Elder Zalqui Prime's mental voice carried a weight of cosmic weariness. They have developed more ways to kill their own kind than all other species in this galaxy combined. They have survived ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that should have ended their civilization, and wars that consumed entire continents. The Vorthak delegation exchanged glances. These achievements seemed impressive for such a young species, but hardly threatening to an advanced spacefaring empire. They adapt, Elder Thexmore 9 continued, not over generations like most species, but within their individual lifetimes. Present them with an obstacle, and they will find 7 different ways to overcome it. Face them with a superior enemy, and they will study, learn, and return stronger. More images appeared. Humans in frozen wastelands building shelters from nothing. Humans crossing vast oceans in wooden vessels. Humans climbing the highest mountains on their world simply because they existed. But then the images shifted to something more disturbing. They do not merely fight for territory or resources, Elder Yunsai Epsilon projected. They fight for ideas, for concepts, for the freedom to make their own choices. They will die rather than submit to any authority they do not choose to accept. The display showed humans standing against overwhelming odds throughout their history. Small groups fighting massive armies, individuals refusing to surrender even when facing certain death, entire populations choosing destruction rather than subjugation. During their most recent global conflict, Elder Zalqui Prime's mental voice carried undertones of something that might have been fear. Their species split into opposing factions. The casualties numbered in the tens of millions. Yet when the conflict ended, they rebuilt their civilization in mere decades and reached for the stars. Zeph Kanul remained unconvinced. Honored elders, while these humans may be remarkable for such a young species, they remain confined to their single system. Our intelligence reports show they possess perhaps a dozen primitive spacecraft and a few orbital stations. How could such a limited force threaten the Vorthak Empire? The 3 Prime Elders seemed to exchange some form of communication beyond the perception of the other species present. When they responded, their unified mental voice carried an authority that had governed the galaxy for eons. Because, they said in unison, when we first encountered humans, we made the mistake of thinking as you do now. The chamber's display sphere went dark for a moment, then filled with an image that made several delegates recoil. It showed a massive space station, clearly of Prime Elder construction, reduced to twisted wreckage drifting in the void of space. Observation Post Omega 7, Elder Thexmore 9 explained. We established it at the edge of their system to study their development. We thought ourselves safely hidden behind our most advanced cloaking technology. They found us, Elder Yunsai Epsilon continued, not through advanced sensors or superior technology, but through the application of simple logic and relentless determination. They calculated where such an observation post would need to be positioned, and they came looking. When they discovered us, Elder Zalqui Prime's voice carried a note of what sounded like admiration. They did not attack immediately. They observed us as we had observed them. They learned our patrol patterns, studied our technology, and planned. The image shifted to show a sleek vessel of human construction, its hull scarred by weapons fire but still intact. It was dwarfed by the massive Elder Station, yet somehow it had emerged victorious from their encounter. The human ship was crewed by only 6 individuals, Elder Thexmore 9 revealed. They called it an exploratory mission. We learned later that their species had debates about whether to make contact or maintain secrecy. These 6 chose to make contact on their own initiative. They disabled our weapons with improvised electromagnetic pulses, breached our hull using mining charges, and fought through our security systems with projectile weapons that should have been useless against our technology, Elder Yunsai Epsilon continued. But they did not come to destroy. They came to communicate. The images now showed the interior of the Elder Station, where human figures in primitive spacesuits stood before advanced alien technology. One of them, a female with short dark hair, was apparently in the process of establishing communication with the station's systems. The one who appeared to lead them introduced herself as Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Strategic Command, Elder Zal Kui Prime recalled. She informed us that humanity was aware of our presence and requested formal diplomatic contact. When we attempted to explain our position as observers, she made a statement that we have never forgotten. The chamber waited in absolute silence. She said, "If you're going to watch us, you should at least introduce yourselves. We don't like being spied on, and we're very good at taking apart things that don't belong." The implications of this statement rippled through the assembled delegates. A species barely capable of interstellar travel had detected and neutralized prime elder technology, then demanded diplomatic recognition as equals. This incident occurred 43 cycles ago, Elder Thexmore 9 explained. Since then, we have maintained limited contact with human representatives. They have honored our request for minimal interaction while they develop their spacefaring capabilities. In return, we have shared certain basic principles of galactic civilization. They learn quickly, Elder Yunsai Epsilon added. Their technological advancement in the past 4 decades has been exponential. They have established permanent settlements on 6 worlds within their system and are preparing for expansion beyond it. But more concerning, Elder Zalqui Prime continued, is their apparent preparation for conflict. Every human vessel we have observed includes weapons systems. Every human outpost includes defensive installations. They are not exploring space to find new homes or resources. They are expanding to ensure their survival, and they are doing so with the assumption that they will need to fight for it. Zeph Canul felt the first stirring of unease. Surely you overestimate their capabilities, honored elders. How advanced could they have become in such a short time? The Prime Elders projected a new set of images. Human ships, clearly more advanced than the first vessel shown, moved through space in precise formations. Their hulls bristled with weapon systems that seemed to blend multiple technological approaches into hybrid designs. They do not develop technology linearly like other species, Elder Thexmore 9 explained. They pursue multiple solutions simultaneously, then combine the most effective elements. Their ships use propulsion systems based on our gravity manipulation technology, but they have modified it with their own innovations that make it more efficient than our original designs. Their weapons combine energy projection, kinetic bombardment, and exotic matter manipulation in ways that should be theoretically impossible, Elder Yunsai Epsilon added. They approach engineering problems with a creativity that borders on madness, yet somehow their solutions work. They have also demonstrated something we have rarely seen in spacefaring species. Elder Zalqui Prime's mental voice carried a note of deep concern. Unity of purpose despite individual diversity. Their species includes billions of individuals with different cultures, beliefs, and objectives, yet when faced with external threats, they act as one organism. The images now showed massive human industrial installations on airless moons, automated mining operations in asteroid belts, and what appeared to be enormous shipyards in deep space. The scale of human expansion within their single system was staggering. We project that within 10 cycles, they will begin expansion beyond their system, Elder Thexmore 9 stated. When they do, they will encounter other species. Based on our observations of their history, these encounters will not go well for anyone who attempts to dominate or control them. Therefore, the 3 Prime Elders spoke in unison. We issue this formal edict to all species represented in this council. Never provoke the humans. Do not attempt to conquer their territory. Do not enslave their populations. Do not even approach their space without explicit invitation. The chamber erupted into chaos. Dozens of species began communicating simultaneously, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the flood of questions, protests, and concerns. The hive mind collective's representatives created a buzzing harmony of confusion, while the Synthetic Confederation's emissaries emitted rapid streams of data that overloaded several nearby translation systems. Zef-Kanul raised his voice above the din. "Honored elders, with respect, you ask us to fear a species that has not even left their birth system. The Vorthak Empire spans 47 star systems and commands fleets that number in the thousands. How can 6 humans with primitive weapons possibly threaten such might?" The chamber gradually fell silent as all attention focused on the Prime Elder's response. "Because," Elder Zalqui Prime said with the weight of cosmic authority, "those 6 humans weren't their military. They were scientists." 6 cycles passed after the Galactic Council's emergency session, and Zef-Kanul had dismissed the Prime Elder's warnings as the fearful ramblings of beings too ancient to understand modern warfare. The Vorthak Empire continued its expansion, claiming 3 more systems and adding billions of new subjects to their domain. The humans, as far as Vorthak intelligence could determine, remained confined to their single-star system, content to build their small outposts and conduct their primitive research. Admiral Kexvar Thul, Supreme Commander of the Crimson Fleet, stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Bone Crusher as it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Behind him, a formation of 200 Vorthak warships materialized from the void, their crimson hulls gleaming with weapon arrays capable of reducing planets to molten slag. "Scan the system," Kexvar Thul ordered his tactical officer. "I want a complete catalog of human installations, fleet strength, and defensive capabilities." The bridge crew worked efficiently at their stations, their crystalline carapaces clicking softly as they manipulated holographic controls. Within moments, the results appeared on the main display screen. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Nex Zikul, "we detect 17 human vessels within sensor range. They appear to be concentrated around the 4th planet from their star. These ships are significantly smaller than our cruisers, and their energy signatures suggest primitive fusion-based propulsion." Kexvar Thul examined the tactical display with satisfaction. The human ships looked more like cargo transports than military vessels, with bulky hulls and minimal weapons arrays. "What about planetary defenses?" "We detect several orbital stations around their homeworld and the 4th planet," Nex Zikul continued. "Energy output suggests they are primarily civilian installations, though some appear to have defensive weaponry. Nothing that would pose a threat to our fleet." "Excellent." Kexvar Thul turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the human command structure. It's time to inform them of their new status within the Vorthak Empire." The communications officer manipulated her controls, and after several minutes, a signal lock was established. The main screen flickered and resolved into an image that made several Vorthak officers step back in surprise. A human face appeared on the screen, belonging to a middle-aged man with gray hair and calculating eyes. He wore what appeared to be a military uniform of some kind, and behind him, other humans worked at control stations that seemed surprisingly advanced for such a primitive species. "This is Admiral Marcus Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force," the human said calmly. "You are in violation of the Sol System security perimeter. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." Kexvar Thul's mandibles clicked with amusement. The human actually believed he was in a position to make demands. "I am Admiral Kexvar Thul of the Vorthak Imperial Navy. You will surrender your system to Imperial authority immediately. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilian populations." The human admiral's expression didn't change. "I see. Let me be clear, Admiral. This system is under human protection. Any hostile action against human settlements will be met with appropriate force. I suggest you reconsider your position. Appropriate force? Kex Varthul's voice carried the clicking sound of Vorthak laughter. Human, you face 200 Imperial warships, each one capable of sterilizing a continent. Your 17 cargo vessels pose no threat to my fleet. 17? Admiral Rodriguez glanced at something off-screen. I think your sensors may need recalibration. Before Kex Varthul could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the Bone Crusher. His tactical officer's carapace had shifted to an alarmed red coloration. Sir! New contacts emerging from hyperspace. Multiple signatures incoming. The tactical display exploded with new symbols as human vessels materialized around the Vorthak fleet. Not 17 ships, but hundreds. They appeared to emerge from some form of advanced stealth technology. Their hulls sleek and predatory compared to the bulky civilian vessels originally detected. How is this possible? Kex Varthul demanded. Our sensors detected no hidden fleet. Admiral Rodriguez's image remained steady on the communication screen. You detected what we wanted you to detect, Admiral. Those 17 ships you scanned? They're automated decoys. Our actual fleet has been observing your approach for the past 6 hours. Kex Varthul studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human ships moved with precision that suggested advanced coordination systems. Their formations were unlike anything in Vorthak tactical manuals, combining elements of pack-hunting behavior with geometric patterns that seemed to optimize both offensive and defensive capabilities. Even so, Kex Varthul said, trying to maintain his commanding presence, you are still outnumbered. Our vessels are larger and more heavily armed. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Admiral Rodriguez said with what might have been pity, you're thinking like a traditional military force. We don't fight like that. The human ships suddenly accelerated, their formation dissolving into what appeared to be chaos. Rather than engaging in direct combat, they began executing maneuvers that seemed to defy tactical logic. Small groups of vessels would dart in, target specific systems on Vorthak ships with surgical precision, then withdraw before return fire could be effective. What are they doing? Kex Varthul demanded as his fleet began taking damage despite not landing a single hit on the enemy. They're not trying to destroy our ships, Nex Zikul reported, her voice filled with confusion. They're targeting specific systems, communication arrays, weapon guidance systems, propulsion controls. It's like they're trying to disable us rather than eliminate us. The human attack pattern became clearer as the engagement continued. Rather than the massive exchanges of firepower typical of galactic warfare, the humans employed hit-and-run tactics that targeted vulnerabilities in Vorthak ship design. They seemed to possess detailed knowledge of Imperial vessel specifications, striking at weak points with weapons that appeared specifically designed for the task. How do they know our ship configurations? Kex Varthul asked the question more to himself than to his crew. Admiral Rodriguez answered from the communication screen, which somehow remained active despite the ongoing battle. We've been watching your expansion for 3 years, Admiral. Every ship in your fleet, every tactical formation you use, every weapon system you deploy. We study our potential enemies very carefully. Impossible! Our ships use quantum encryption and adaptive hull plating. Your primitive sensors couldn't penetrate our security measures. You're right, Rodriguez agreed. Our sensors couldn't, but your own ships could. The implication hit Kex Varthul like a physical blow. You've infiltrated our systems. 37 months ago, your forces conquered the Nexari homeworld. Among the refugees who escaped to neutral space were several thousand individuals with expertise in quantum computing and cryptographic systems. We offered them sanctuary, citizenship, and the opportunity to help defend against future Vorthak aggression. The tactical display showed that nearly a third of the Vorthak fleet had been rendered combat ineffective, their vessels drifting with disabled weapon systems and compromised propulsion, yet not a single ship had been destroyed outright. "You're using our own victims against us," Kexvar Thul said with grudging respect. "We're giving them the chance to defend others from what they experienced," Rodriguez corrected. "The Nexari are excellent teachers. They've helped us understand how your empire thinks, how it operates, and how it can be stopped." A new alarm sounded on the Bone Crusher's bridge. The engineering officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Unknown technology signatures." The tactical display shifted to show the broader system view. Around the orbits of the outer planets, massive structures were powering up. They appeared to be some form of defense platform, but their energy outputs were unlike anything in Vorthak databases. "What are those installations?" Kexvar Thul demanded. Admiral Rodriguez consulted something off-screen. "Magnetic acceleration platforms. We call them mass drivers. Each one can launch a projectile at approximately 15% of light speed. At that velocity, even a small piece of metal becomes a devastating kinetic weapon." "You're bluffing. No civilization would build weapons that could damage their own system." "We're not targeting our system, Admiral. We're targeting yours." The display showed targeting solutions extending far beyond the Sol system, reaching toward Vorthak space. The platforms weren't just defensive weapons. They were long-range siege engines capable of striking targets multiple star systems away. 47 star systems," Rodriguez continued conversationally. 18 billion Vorthak civilians. 73 orbital installations that serve as critical infrastructure nodes for your empire. Our targeting computers have solutions for all of them." Kexvar Thul felt something he had never experienced in his entire military career. Fear. Not for himself, but for his entire species. "You would commit genocide over a territorial dispute?" "No," Rodriguez replied firmly. "But we will ensure that aggressive expansion toward human space becomes too costly to contemplate. Every Vorthak world now lives under the threat of kinetic bombardment from Sol system. Attack us, and we will systematically dismantle your empire's infrastructure." The human admiral leaned forward slightly. "But here's what makes this particularly interesting, Admiral. We don't need to destroy your worlds to cripple your empire. We just need to eliminate your space-based manufacturing, your orbital shipyards, your communication relays. Without those, your 47 systems become 47 isolated worlds with no way to maintain their technology or coordinate their defense." Kexvar Thul looked at his tactical display again. The human fleet continued its precise dismantling of his forces, while the mass driver platforms completed their power-up sequences. His own fleet, the pride of the Vorthak Empire, was being systematically neutralized by an enemy that had emerged from what he thought was an insignificant backwater system. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Immediate withdrawal from Sol system," Rodriguez replied. "Cessation of all hostile activities toward human space and human interests. Release of all Nexari refugees and any other displaced populations currently held by your empire." "And if we refuse?" "Then in approximately 6 hours, every Vorthak military installation within 50 light-years will cease to exist. In 12 hours, your orbital shipyards follow. In 18 hours, we start targeting your communication networks and logistics hubs." The bridge of the Bone Crusher fell silent except for the sound of various alarms and damage reports. Kexvar Thul had 200 warships under his command, representing decades of imperial shipbuilding and military investment. Yet somehow, a species he had dismissed as primitive had rendered his entire fleet helpless in a matter of hours. "How?" he asked. "How did you prepare for this so quickly? Our intelligence reports indicated you had no significant military capabilities." Admiral Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Admiral, You've been thinking about this all wrong. You assumed we would meet your invasion with our own invasion. You prepared for a conventional engagement between opposing fleets. But we don't fight wars the way the rest of the galaxy does. The display showed new images. Vast underground installations, hidden shipyards built inside asteroids, manufacturing facilities disguised as research stations. The scope of human military preparation was staggering. We've been preparing for this encounter since the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe, Rodriguez continued. Every human settlement includes manufacturing capabilities for military hardware. Every civilian vessel can be converted to military purposes within hours. Every citizen receives basic combat training as part of their education. Your entire species is militarized? Our entire species is prepared to defend itself. There's a difference. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. We don't want to conquer your empire, Admiral. We don't want to rule other species or expand our territory beyond what we need for our own survival. But we will not tolerate any threat to human independence. Kexvar Thul realized he was facing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had achieved military supremacy not through aggression, but through defensive preparation. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a fortress, ready to repel any invasion, while simultaneously threatening massive retaliation against anyone who dared to attack them. The Prime Elders warned us, he said quietly. Yes, they did. We have a great deal of respect for the Prime Elders. They understood something that your empire apparently didn't. Humans fight differently when our survival is at stake. The communication screen flickered as Admiral Rodriguez received some kind of report. Admiral, I'm going to make this very simple. You have 30 minutes to begin your withdrawal from Sol's system. Every minute after that deadline, we will eliminate one of your ships, not disable it. Eliminate it completely. And if we comply? Then you return to Vorthak space with a message for your Emperor. Human space is neutral territory. We will trade with any species that approaches us peacefully. We will share technology with civilizations that treat us as equals. But any attempt to conquer or control us will result in the complete destruction of the aggressor's military capabilities. Kexvar Thul looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. These were veterans of dozens of campaigns, warriors who had never known defeat. Now they looked at their instruments with the expressions of beings who had just discovered that everything they thought they knew about warfare was wrong. Very well, he said finally. The Crimson Fleet will withdraw, but this isn't over, human. The Empire will not forget this humiliation. Admiral Rodriguez nodded. We're counting on that, Admiral. The next time you consider expanding in our direction, remember how easily we neutralized your entire fleet without destroying a single ship. Now imagine what we could do if we were actually trying to kill you. The communication screen went dark. Around the Vorthak fleet, the human ships maintained their positions, weapons trained on disabled Imperial vessels. The mass driver platforms continued to track targets in distant Vorthak space, their threat implicit but unmistakable. As the Bone Crusher began its humiliating withdrawal from Sol's system, Kexvar Thul contemplated the implications of what had just occurred. The Vorthak Empire had just suffered its first military defeat in over 3 centuries, and it had come at the hands of a species that most of the galaxy considered primitive. But what troubled him most was the realization that the humans had been right about one thing. They weren't trying to kill his fleet. They were sending a message. And that message was now traveling at light speed toward every corner of the galaxy, carried by refugees, traders, and diplomatic channels. Humanity had just announced to the universe that they would not be conquered. More importantly, they had demonstrated the capability to back up that announcement with devastating force. The Prime Elder's warning echoed in Kexvar Thul's mind as his fleet limped home. Never provoke the humans. The Vorthak Empire had just learned why. The news of the Vorthak defeat spread through the galaxy like a quantum shockwave, traveling along trade routes, diplomatic channels, and refugee networks with unprecedented speed. Within 2 cycles, every major civilization had received detailed accounts of the engagement at Sol System, and the galactic political landscape began shifting in ways that no one had anticipated. Emperor Zakmor Thul, supreme ruler of the Vorthak Empire, stood in his throne chamber surrounded by the greatest military minds his species had ever produced. The crystalline walls of the imperial palace reflected the light of 3 suns, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled generals and admirals. Yet despite the grandeur of their surroundings, the mood in the chamber was one of barely controlled panic. "Explain to me," the emperor's voice echoed through the vast hall, "how 200 of our finest warships were defeated by a species that had never engaged in interstellar warfare." Admiral Kexvar Thul stood at the center of the assembly, his carapace bearing the scars of his recent encounter with humanity. "Your Imperial Majesty, the humans fight with a tactical approach unlike any we have encountered. They do not seek glorious victory or territorial conquest. They seek complete deterrence through overwhelming defensive capability." "Deterrence?" General Nix Kavul stepped forward, her scarred exoskeleton indicating decades of successful campaigns. "They threaten to destroy our entire infrastructure. That is not deterrence. It is terrorism on a galactic scale." "Is it?" Kexvar Thul challenged. "They did not attack our worlds. They did not target our civilians. They specifically outlined military targets that would cripple our expansion capability while leaving our population intact. They offered us a choice: withdraw or face systematic dismantling of our war machine." Emperor Zakmor Thul's massive form shifted on the crystal throne. "And you chose to withdraw rather than test their resolve." "Yes, Your Majesty, because I believed their threat was genuine." The Emperor's mandibles clicked with displeasure. "Based on what evidence?" "Based on their demonstrated capabilities, their tactical precision, and their detailed knowledge of our fleet configurations." Kexvar Thul activated a holographic display showing the Sol system engagement. "They knew the exact location of every critical system on our ships. They had prepared specific countermeasures for our standard tactical formations. Most importantly, they had the infrastructure in place to carry out their threats immediately." The hologram shifted to show the massive acceleration platforms positioned throughout the human star system. "These installations were not constructed in response to our arrival. Our intelligence estimates indicate they have been under construction for at least 5 cycles. The humans have been preparing for galactic-scale warfare since before they made official contact with any other species." "How is such preparation possible?" demanded Fleet Commander Tex Z. Nul. "Our expansion has been successful because most species are not militarized. They focus on commerce, science, or cultural development. Only when faced with conquest do they attempt to build defenses, and by then, it is too late." "The humans are different," Kexvar Thul replied. "According to our intelligence analysis, their entire civilization is structured around the assumption that they will eventually face existential threats. Every aspect of their society includes contingencies for warfare." The holographic display showed images of human settlements, cities with underground shelters, factories that could be rapidly converted to weapons production, civilian transports designed with military modifications already integrated. Even their scientific research stations included defensive installations. "Their species has survived multiple extinction events on their homeworld," Kexvar Thul continued. "Ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, asteroid impacts, and wars that consumed their entire planet. This experience has shaped their approach to expansion into space. They do not build colonies, they build fortresses." Emperor Zakmor Thul studied the images with growing unease. "What are the strategic implications of this development?" "Complete revision of our expansion doctrine," General Nix Kavul replied grimly. The human defensive perimeter now extends far beyond their star system. Their mass driver platforms can target any world within 50 light years. Any attempt to establish Imperial presence in that region would trigger immediate retaliation. Furthermore, Kexvarthul added, their demonstration has inspired other species to reconsider their own defensive capabilities. We are receiving reports of increased military construction in systems that were previously compliant with Imperial occupation. The Emperor's throne chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The Vorthak Empire had built its power on the principle that most species were either too peaceful or too primitive to mount effective resistance. The human example had shattered that assumption by demonstrating that a defensive civilization could achieve military superiority through preparation and technological innovation, rather than aggressive expansion. "There is another concern, Your Majesty," Admiral Kexvarthul said quietly. The humans did not act alone. They had detailed intelligence about our fleet compositions, our tactical doctrines, and our strategic objectives. This information came from refugees of our previous conquests. "The Nexari," General Nixkavul said with distaste. "We should have eliminated them completely rather than allowing survivors to escape." "That approach would not have prevented this outcome," Kexvarthul replied. "The humans actively seek contact with refugees from conquered worlds. They offer citizenship, protection, and the opportunity to contribute to defensive preparations against future aggression. Our expansion has inadvertently provided them with the intelligence and expertise needed to counter our military capabilities." The holographic display showed a new image, the human capital world, with orbital installations clearly constructed using technologies from dozens of different species. The fusion of design philosophies created defensive systems that were more advanced than anything a single species could develop. "They learn from everyone we defeat," the Emperor said slowly. "Every conquest provides them with new capabilities. Worse than that, Your Majesty. Every species that successfully resists us now has human support. We are receiving reports of advanced defensive technologies appearing in systems throughout the Outer Rim. The humans are sharing their weapons designs with anyone willing to oppose Imperial expansion. In the depths of space, far from the crystalline halls of the Vorthak Palace, another meeting was taking place. The Prime Elders had convened an emergency session aboard their ancient vessel, a ship so old that its origins were lost to galactic history. Elder Thexmore IX's translucent form shimmered in the chamber's center, while Elders Yunsai Epsilon and Zalqui Prime manifested as geometric patterns of pure energy. "The humans have exceeded our projections," Elder Yunsai Epsilon communicated to the assembled consciousness. "Their response to the Vorthak incursion demonstrates capabilities beyond what we observed during our initial contact. They have evolved their defensive doctrine," Elder Zalqui Prime agreed. "What began as preparation against unknown threats has become a comprehensive strategy for galactic deterrence." Elder Thexmore IX's form solidified slightly. "The Galactic Council has requested our assessment of the new strategic reality. Multiple species are demanding protection from both Vorthak expansion and human retaliation capabilities." The ancient beings had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But the human emergence presented something unprecedented, a species that achieved dominance through defensive supremacy rather than aggressive expansion. Their weapons threatened not conquest, but deterrence. Their technology promised not subjugation, but protection. "The humans have created a new paradigm," Elder Yunsai Epsilon observed. "They do not seek to rule others, yet they have made themselves too dangerous to challenge. They offer alliance to any species willing to accept them as equals, yet they threaten destruction to any who attempt dominance. The Vorthak expansion has effectively ended," Elder Zalqui Prime noted. 17 systems that were marked for conquest have now allied themselves with human defensive networks. The refugees from conquered worlds have found sanctuary and purpose in human space. The Empire faces a choice: abandon its expansion doctrine or face systematic dismantling of its military infrastructure. And other aggressive species are taking notice, Elder Thexmore 9 added. The Crimson Swarm has halted its expansion toward human space. The Machine Collective has requested formal diplomatic contact with human representatives. Even the Void Hunters have begun avoiding systems under human protection. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, a single species had achieved deterrence against all forms of aggressive expansion through the threat of overwhelming retaliation. Yet, unlike previous dominant species, the humans showed no interest in using their capabilities for conquest. Back in human space, Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the command center of Earth Strategic Command, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current galactic situation. Representatives from 43 different species had requested formal alliance with humanity in the 2 cycles since the Vorthak encounter. Refugee populations were arriving daily, bringing expertise, knowledge, and desperate gratitude for protection against imperial expansion. Admiral, reported Commander Sarah Chen, now promoted to head of interspecies relations, we're receiving another request for defensive assistance. The Melodian system is reporting Vorthak scout ships conducting reconnaissance flights near their orbital installations. Rodriguez studied the tactical display showing Melodian space. Response time from our nearest asset? The Corvette squadron stationed at Kepler 442 could reach Melodian space in 18 hours. However, our intelligence suggests the Vorthak forces are conducting surveillance rather than preparing for invasion. They're testing our commitment, Rodriguez realized. Send the corvettes, but with orders to maintain defensive posture unless directly attacked. Signal the Melodian government that human vessels are en route to provide consultation on defensive preparations. Sir, Commander Chen said hesitantly, we're stretching our defensive commitments across an increasingly large area. Intelligence estimates that we're now providing protection guarantees to over 60 worlds across 28 star systems. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The price of our demonstration, Commander. We proved that we could defend ourselves against any aggressor. Now every threatened species in the galaxy wants our protection. Are we prepared to honor all these commitments? We have to be. Our entire defensive doctrine is based on deterrence through credible threat. If we fail to protect any species that has allied with us, our deterrent capability collapses. The command center's main display showed the current disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy. The original 17 ships that the Vorthak had detected had multiplied into a fleet of over 800 vessels, with new construction facilities operating at maximum capacity to meet defensive commitments. The irony, Rodriguez observed, is that our success in defending against conquest has forced us to become a galactic military power. We didn't want to rule other species, but we've made ourselves responsible for their protection. Perhaps that was inevitable, Commander Chen suggested. The Prime Elder's files indicate that every sufficiently advanced species eventually faces the choice between isolation and responsibility. We chose responsibility. No, Rodriguez corrected. We chose survival. Everything else follows from that choice. A new alarm sounded in the command center as priority communications arrived from multiple sources. Commander Chen quickly coordinated the incoming signals and projected a summary on the main display. Admiral, we're receiving reports of a major development in Vorthak space. Emperor Zak Morthul has announced a fundamental change in imperial policy. They're abandoning territorial expansion and offering to negotiate the return of conquered populations to their homeworlds. Rodriguez felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Confirmation. Multiple sources, including Prime Elder communications and independent verification from the Galactic Council. The Vorthak Empire is officially withdrawing from expansion operations and requesting mediated negotiations for territorial disputes. The strategic implications were enormous. The primary aggressive power in the galaxy had just abandoned conquest as a policy objective, effectively ending the threat that had driven human military development for the past 5 cycles. "What are their conditions?" Rodriguez asked. "Guaranteed security for existing Vorthak systems, recognition of their sovereignty within current territorial boundaries, and establishment of formal diplomatic relations with human-led defensive alliances." Rodriguez considered the offer carefully. The Vorthak Empire controlled 47 star systems and billions of civilian populations. Their complete collapse would create a power vacuum that might lead to chaos throughout the galaxy. Better to have them as a contained regional power than as a source of refugee populations and territorial instability. "Signal the Emperor that humanity is willing to participate in mediated negotiations," he decided, "but make it clear that our defensive commitments to threatened species remain in effect. Any attempt to resume expansion will trigger the same response they experienced at Sol System." "Understood, sir." As the command center staff began implementing the new diplomatic initiatives, Rodriguez reflected on how completely the galactic balance had shifted. The human species had emerged from isolation to become the dominant military power in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that they would not be conquered. The Prime Elder's warning had proven prophetic: never provoke the humans. The Vorthak Empire had learned this lesson at the cost of their expansion doctrine and their status as the galaxy's primary threat. Now other species were learning a different lesson: align with humanity and gain protection against any aggressor. In the end, Rodriguez thought the greatest victory was not the defeat of the Vorthak fleet, but the creation of a new galactic order based on mutual defense rather than territorial conquest. Humanity had not sought to rule the galaxy, but they had made themselves indispensable to its security. The Prime Elders had been right about something else. Humans were unlike any other species in the galaxy. They had achieved dominance not by becoming conquerors, but by becoming unconquerable. And in doing so, they had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization itself. As reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, describing the establishment of new defensive alliances and the cessation of aggressive expansion by multiple species, Rodriguez realized that the human example had created something unprecedented: a galaxy at peace, not because no one could fight, but because everyone knew the cost of starting a war. The warning had been ignored. The consequences had been suffered, and the galaxy would never be the same.